بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن تمسك بهديه إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد, Ibn Rajab rahimahullah ta'ala, the author, he then says, وانقسم هؤلاء إلى قسمين أحدهما من نفى كثيرا مما ورد به الكتاب والسنة من ذلك لاستلزامه عنده التشبيه بالمخلوقين، كقول المعتزلة لو رؤي لكان جسما لأنه لا يرى إلا في جهة، وقولهم لو كان له كلام يسمع لكان جسما، ووافقهم من نفى الاستواء فنفوه لهذه الشبهة. وهذا طريق المعتزلة والجهمية، وقد اتفق السلف على تبديعهم وتضليلهم، وقد سلك سبيلهم في بعض الأمور كثير ممن انتسب إلى السنة والحديث من المتأخرين. These people then became split into two further groups, two further types. The first are those who negated many things that were mentioned in the Kitab and in the Sunnah. They negated many things that were in the Kitab and in the Sunnah. The reason behind that being, they believed that affirming certain attributes would be a means of making Allah resemble His created beings, and that it's a must for this attribute to be affirmed for Allah to be similar to His created beings, which is haram, which is false. Allah is not like His creatures, so therefore it's impossible for this attribute to be literal, for us to affirm it and acknowledge it. Impossible. He says an example of this is like what the Mu'tazila said: if Allah could be seen, then Allah would have to be a jism. And the word jism is often translated in the English language to mean a body, a physical body. And the word jism in the Arabic language doesn't necessarily mean that originally. From the meanings of the word jism in the current language and usage is a body, but it doesn't necessarily mean that all of the time. What is important is that they say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cannot be a jism. Allah can't be a body, if that's how you want to translate it. So therefore it's impossible for Allah to be seen. And if Allah was seen, then He would be in a jiha, a mortal location or direction. In other words, Ibn Rajab is saying that in the Quran and in the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, there's ample evidence that Allah will be seen. Allah will be seen on the Day of Judgment in paradise. And these people, the Mu'tazila, they said, no, Allah cannot be seen. Why? There is no proof for it? No. They rationalized it and they said that if Allah is seen physically with one's eyes, then that puts Allah into a body, and that puts Allah into a mortal location. He says here, and also those who say that if Allah had speech that could actually be heard, then it would make Him a jism as well. He says, and there are many people who agree with them, those who deny the istiwa, saying that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not make istiwa over the arsh. And they denied istiwa because of this doubt, that how can Allah make istiwa? That means Allah is in a place, that Allah is in a mortal location, Allah has a body, so on and so forth. He says, and this is the way of the Mu'tazila and the Jahmiya. The Jahmiya obviously being older than the Mu'tazila and worse than the Mu'tazila. The Jahmiya were considered to be from the pious predecessors, not even the pious predecessors, but we're so used to saying pious predecessors, but they're wicked predecessors of the Mu'tazila, the forefathers of the Mu'tazila. So these people, the initial followers of Jahm ibn Safwan, they became the Mu'tazila, and they tried to, blend it even more. And then, as we said before, those who came after the Mu'tazila from the Ash'ariyah tried to even soften it even more. He says this is the way of the Mu'tazila and the Jahmiya. And the Salaf radiallahu anhum, he said they unanimously agreed upon declaring them to be innovators. They were mubtadi'ah, and that they were astray and misguided. He then says, and there are many people who came after them, unfortunately, they agree with many of them and many things that they said. He says, and these people were from those who attribute themselves to the Sunnah. As we explained, many people who came and they wrote books on Sharh of Hadith, they wrote books on fiqh, they wrote books on Arabic language and things like this. They called themselves Ahlul Sunnah. They attributed themselves to Ahlul Sunnah. They came later on in the later generations, and they agree with many of the points of the Mu'tazila, like we said before. An example of this, the Ash'aris, as we said before. Those who call themselves Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, even some of them may call themselves Ahlul Hadith. And they wrote beneficial books on the Sunnah, and they did a lot. But their Aqidah had a lot of points, which were points of the Mu'tazila and the Jahmiyyah. Unfortunately, he says there are many different things that they agree with them. The examples are so many. Those who deny this attribute, Allah can't have this attribute. It's impossible. It's not literal. It's only figurative. You can't say that. You can't say Allah is Most High. You can't say Allah has the attribute of the yad and the attribute of the wajh and the attribute of love and of hatred and of Allah yastahzi bihim. Allah cannot do this, and so on and so forth. Of the innovations that these people unfortunately believe in and practice, negating Allah's attributes that are clearly mentioned in Kitab and Sunnah, with this one doubt: if Allah made istiwa, if Allah had a face, if Allah had a hand, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had kalam that could actually be heard and isn't kalam al-nafs or kalam nafsi, inner kalam, inner speech, then that would mean that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has to have, waliyadu billah, the things that the human beings have, a voice box and a tongue and things like this. La ilaha illallah. That's a catastrophe in one's aqidah, to compare Allah to His creation, then negate what's in the Kitab and the Sunnah, and then declare those who do affirm Allah's attributes in Kitab and Sunnah to be one who resembles Him to His creation. They did it first. The only reason why I say you can't make istiwa is because the only thing about a human being, for someone to arise or rise over something, that means they had to be lower than that thing, and then they got higher than that thing on top of that thing. They look and they think about a human being, and then they determine whether Allah has the attribute or not. Even though Allah talked about it in the Quran, in the Hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, in countless places, speaking about Allah's highness, Allah's loftiness, Allah's istiwa, and things like this. Unfortunately, he then says, rahimahullah ta'ala, many people who agreed with them on many things attributed themselves to Sunnah and Hadith, as we said. And this is something that is very beneficial for the student of knowledge. When we talk about adab of the talib al-ilm, is when you read the different biographies of the people who wrote the different books, the famous ulama who made the shuruh and wrote things like this, you find them having many different problems in their aqidah. And this is one of the reasons why. And it is also beneficial to refute the ignorant people who say that, if a person of the sunnah, this da'iyah, this student, if he makes a mistake and he doesn't recant the mistake and he doesn't come to us and make tawbah on his knees begging and crying for forgiveness, don't take anything from him. And this is the way of the Salaf Salih. If this was the case, then you wouldn't have half of the books on your shelf. If not more than half of the books you would take and you would put them in an incinerator. This author made this mistake, this author did this author had this problem, this aqidah, this book that you study on a daily basis and read on a daily basis. So that doesn't even make any sense, unfortunately. Ibn Rajab rahimahullah ta'ala, he then says, وَالثَّانِي مَنْ رَامَ إِثْبَاتَ ذَلِكَ بِأَدِلَّةِ الْعُقُولِ التي لم يرد بها الأثر ورد على أولئك مقالتهم كما هي طريقة مقاتل بن سليمان ومن تابعه كنوح بن أبي مريم ومن تابعهم طائفة من المحدثين قديما وحديثا وأيضا مسلك الكرامية فمنهم من أثبت لإثبات هذه الصفات الجسم إما لفظا وإما معنى ومنهم من أثبت لله صفات لم يأتي به الكتاب والسنة كالحركة وغير ذلك مما هي عنده لازم الصفات الثابتة وقد أنكر السلف على مقاتل قوله في رده على جهم بأدلة العقل وبالغوا في الطعن عليه ومنهم من استحل قتله منهم مكي بن إبراهيم شيخ البخاري وغيره. He then says rahimahullah, in the second group are those who wanted to affirm those attributes that were in the Kitab and the Sunnah, but they affirmed them based off of the aql, based off of human thinking or human intellect, things, on ways that they affirmed these attributes that were not mentioned in the Athar, not mentioned in the Kitab and the Sunnah. And he says here, and trying to reject those people like this, he says this was the way of Muqatil ibn Sulaiman and those who follow him, such as Nuh ibn Abi Maryam and many other scholars. He says from the people of Hadith, of past and of present, of past and of present. And it's also the method of the Karamiya sect. He says some of these people, they affirmed the jism because they wanted to affirm these attributes. In other words, what he's saying here in this long speech is that there are people who went to the other side of extremism and of mistake and error in order to affirm the attributes that those first group denied and rejected and figuratively interpreted, so on and so forth. The other group went to the other side of extremism and they began to affirm the attributes and saying that Allah does have a jism, naam. Or some of them, waliyadhu billah, maybe even have said that Allah is similar to His creation. And there's no doubt we have to affirm the attributes just as we see them and that we experience them on a daily basis. وَلَا حَوْلَ وَلَا قُوَّةَ إِلَّا بِاللَّهِ. And both of these things are misguidance. They're misguidance. So it goes to show us extremism and how even if you have something that's right and correct, but if you go too far in it, too extreme in it, too excessive in it, then you're going to end up like the people that you're trying to refute. You're going to end up like the people that you're trying to refute. And this happens all of the time, especially in 2016 when it comes to different fitan among the tulab al-ilm and among the mashayikh. We talk about the Sufis and how they venerate their scholars and worship their scholars and go extreme with their scholars. And this and the dalil and the way of the Salaf is the dalil, follow the dalil, do not blind follow, do not worship a man, and so on and so on and so forth. And then they go so extreme in refuting the people, they go so extreme in talking about bid'ah that they end up doing the same exact thing and worshipping scholars and raising scholars above the text of the Kitab and the Sunnah, unfortunately. So this teaches us the student of knowledge is to be balanced, has to have a balance, not to go too far right nor too far to the left. Khairan inshallah. He says some of these people, they affirmed the jism, either in they frankly said it or it was the content of their speech. And he also says, and there's others who affirmed attributes to Allah that weren't mentioned in the Kitab and the Sunnah. Such as the attribute of haraka, saying that Allah moves, And the reason why they said this is because if Allah makes istiwa, then that means Allah has to move. This is what they said. For Allah to rise over the throne, He means that He moved. He was at one place and He moved to another place. They say this is a requirement. This is a must. If you're going to affirm the istiwa, for example, then it must mean that Allah moves. This is what they said. He says, وَقَدْ أَنْكَرَ. He says, and many people here, they were very harsh here with regards to this man, Sulaiman ibn Muqatil. Okay, he said that many of the Salaf, or he says the Salaf, he says وَقَدْ أَنْكَرَ السَّلَف. They rejected him in those statements that he made. Okay, and they spoke on him and they disparaged him greatly, severely, stabbed him verbally. He says, and some of the people of knowledge of the past even declared him to be an apostate, waliyadhu billah. And from them was Makki ibn Ibrahim, the teacher of Imam al-Bukhari, and others. He says, rahimahullah, وَالصَّوَابُ مَا عَلَيْهِ السَّلَفُ الصَّالِحِ من إمرار آيات الصفات وأحاديثها كما جاءت من غير تفسير لها ولا تكييف ولا تمثيل ولا يصح عن أحد منهم خلاف ذلك البتة خصوصا الإمام أحمد ولا خوض في معانيها ولا ضرب مثل والأمثال لها. He then says, and before we move on any further, it's very important for us to understand that there's a difference between how the Salaf as-Salih spoke on issues of Aqidah and how those scholars who came after them spoke on Aqidah. You look at the athar of the Salaf and you look at what the ulama of Ahl Hadith, Ahl Sunnah wrote in the 7th and 8th century. Very, very different. Very different. How the Salaf dealt with the issue and how the ulama of the medieval times dealt with the issue. It's not the same. Ibn Rajab was saying here that they refuted and rejected this man for bringing these intellectual proofs and arguments. And we find many books of many ulama, later generations, you find them writing about the qadr, or about Allah's sifat, or about this concept, refuting the Jahmiyyah, refuting the Ash'ari, and so on and so forth, in 20, 30, 40 pages, and discussing all different types of ins and outs, intellectual proofs and evidences and debates. That's a long topic in itself. What's important, Ibn Rajab says, he says that wasn't the way of Salaf. He goes on to say, and that which is correct is what the Salaf as-Salih were upon. And that was that they mentioned the ayat and they mentioned the hadith of Allah's attributes as they were mentioned, as they came in the Kitab and Sunnah. Not explaining them, not saying this is how they really are, and this is a similitude and a parable, and they're similar to this and equal to that. La. He says, and there's nothing that you can authentically find on any of the Salaf other than what I've just mentioned. Specifically, Imam Ahmad, they didn't speak about these things falsely. They didn't talk about these things like this. They didn't make parables and similitudes and parallels. This is what Allah said in the Quran. The Arabic language is clear, it's understood, and that's it. That's the way of the Salaf as-Salih. Now, be very careful, because when you find and when you read different explanations of different ulama of Sunnah later on, it's like day and night like night. They spoke more philosophically, and they debated with these groups in detailed refutations. Is that correct or is that incorrect? It's a very long discussion. The people that they live with, the doubts that were spread during their times, perhaps they felt that it's a must and we have to get into these issues and roll up our sleeves and get into a fist fight with these different groups. To get into a fist fight with these groups, a rough, rigged, fight. And we have to explain and rebuke their falsehood step by step, piece by piece, in detail. And if we don't, and we just leave it as the general statements and the athar, and that's it, perhaps the true way will be lost, and then people think that the Salaf never understood what they were reading, etc. That's a very long debate in itself. Ibn Rajab, he then says, وإن كان بعض من كان قريبا من زمن أحمد فيهم من فعل شيئا من ذلك اتباعا لطريقة مقاتل فلا يقتدى به في ذلك إن من الاقتداء بأئمة الإسلام كابن المبارك ومالك والثوري والأوزاعي والشافعي وأحمد وإسحاق وأبي عبيد ونحوهم وكل هؤلاء لا يوجد في كلامهم شيء من جنس كلام المتكلمين فضلا عن كلام الفلاسفة ولم يدخل ذلك في كلامه من سلم من قدح وجرح وقد قال أبو زرع الرازي كل من كان عنده علم فلم يصن علمه واحتاج في نشره إلى شيء من كلامي فلست منه. He then says, even though there were some people that were close to the time of Imam Ahmed who did some things similar to Muqatil, who did things that were similar to Muqatil, not Sulaiman ibn Muqatil ibn Sulaiman, slipping of the tongue. He said many of them, or some of the people that were close to the time of Imam Ahmed, they may have done some things and affirmed certain things intellectually and dealt with them like this and like that. He says, but they're not to look at them and take their example. Okay, they're not to be followed in that. Rather, the example is to be taken in the Imams of Islam, such as Ibn al-Mubarak, such as Imam Malik, such as Sufyan al-Thawri, al-Awza'i, Shafi'i, Ahmad, Ishaq, Abu Ubaid, and others. He then says, and there's no one from among these great Imams of the Sunnah who had or made statements like the Mutakallimin, the people of debate and argumentation based off of the ancient philosophy, whether it's Indian philosophy or Greek philosophy or any other type of philosophy. He says here, and those who spoke on this issue here, he says they weren't the Imams of Islam, the Imams of the Sunnah. He says here that Abu Zur'a al-Razi rahimahullah ta'ala said, or he goes on, he mentions a statement of Abu Zur'a in which he speaks on the dispraise of the people who do these things and say these different statements in the manner of the mutakallimin. He says, ومن ذلك أعني محدثات الأمور أو العلوم ما أحدثه فقهاء أهل الرأي من ضوابط وقواعد عقلية ورد فروع الفقه إليها. He says here, and from the newly introduced things, he's moving on now, and he's not talking about Aqidah anymore. And this is very, 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 very beneficial for the student of knowledge. As we've said before, the way of the Salaf as-Salih is not just about Aqidah, as many people falsely attribute to them today. And that's all that the people think. The way of Salaf as-Salih is not just about Aqidah and Bid'ah. Or, at best, some people they say Aqidah, Bid'ah, and Ulama, scholars. And that goes back to the first two, the scholars. That's it. Or some people may say the way of Salaf, even if it don't think just because the person doesn't say it directly doesn't mean that it's not being said physically. They say that the way of the Salaf, the only thing you think about when you think of the way of the Salaf is Bid'ah, Ulama, Aqidah, and refuting people. That's it. And everything else is open. We take from this alim of the 21st century what he said, even though he went against the ulama who came before him. But no. He's talking about fiqh now. So this teaches us that there's a fiqh of the Salaf. And there's a way of Ahlul Hadith in fiqh and also in Hadith, as we said before. And the sciences of Hadith. And refuting and criticizing, talking about the narrators, whatever, any issue of the deen, there is a manhaj salaf. And we are to try our best to take and learn from those generations in all aspects of the religion, not just in refutations, not just in aqidah, not just in names and attributes of Allah. Very important concept. He says here, is what some of the fuqaha, some of the jurists of Ahlul Ra'i, the people called Ahlul Ra'i, the people of opinion, the people of individual, baseless thinking, rationalizing things. Okay? He says they made principles, they made maxims, they made rules in which they declared and determined to be dominant over the furu'. He says taking the subsidiary issues of fiqh back to these principles, back to these foundations. سواء مخالفة السنن أم موافقتها, regardless whether they were in agreement with the sunnah or against the sunnah. They made this general principle, so therefore if a specific hadith comes and goes against the general principle, they wouldn't take the hadith. They wouldn't implement the hadith. They wouldn't act upon the hadith. And that's a big problem. And this argument is explained in detail in the books of Usul al-Fiqh, in the books of al-Mustalah, the books of Shuruh, things like this. What is important is that they made principles, and with those principles, they rejected the specific dalil. How reminiscent is that of today? People make principles, and regardless what the dalil states, it has to go back to the principle. Very unfortunate. طردا لتلك القواعد المقررة وإن كان أصلها مما تأولوه على نصوص الكتاب والسنة لكن بتأويلات يخالفهم غيرهم فيها وهذا الذي أنكره أئمة الإسلام على من أنكروه من فقهاء أهل الرأي بالحجاز والعراق وبالغوا في ذمه وإنكاره. He says here, it says from those things that they had interpreted from the Kitab and Sunnah. In other words, they made the principles based off of the Kitab and Sunnah in general. He says, however, some of the different interpretations and understandings that they had, the rest of the ulama didn't agree with them. He says, and this is, many of the ulama refuted these people and criticized them and repudiated them from the ulama, the fuqaha of Ahlul Ra'i, what they call Ahlul Ra'i, the people that dealt heavily with qiyas, the people that dealt heavily with thinking and not too much with the athar and the sunnah. I'm not saying that you don't think in the athar and the sunnah as well, but we're talking about sheer thinking without not being based off of the sunnah. People that dealt heavily with these different points of argumentation and hypothetical proses, what if, and perhaps, and so on and so on and so forth. He says here, from Hijaz and Iraq, and these people, many of them were refuted. He says, فأما الأئمة وفقهاء أهل الحديث فإنهم يتبعون الحديث الصحيح حيث كان إذا كان معمولا به عند الصحابة ومن بعدهم أو عند طائفة منهم. فأما ما اتفق السلف على تركه فلا يجوز العمل به لأنه ما تركوه إلا على علم أنه لا يؤمن به. He then says, as far as the A'immah, the Fuqaha of Ahl Hadith, he says, then they follow the Hadith of Sahih, the authentic Hadith, whereas it is implemented and acted upon by the Sahaba, or some of them, or those who came after them. As for that which the Salaf agreed upon is not to be acted upon, he says, then it's impermissible to act upon. And that's because they only left it off because they knew and they were taught that it wasn't to be implemented and acted upon. Now, this is a very, very, very critical issue here that needs a lot of explanation, but we do not have the time. And that is the concept of implementing a hadith in light of what the Salaf as-Salih did. The concept of implementing an authentic hadith in light of the views, the fatwa of the Salaf, the Sahaba, all of them or some of them, etc. This is a very, very problematic issue, extremely problematic from so many different aspects. From them is that we find statements of many ulama who came before Ibn Rajab that said that a person is, or that the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, if it's authentic, it doesn't need anything else. It doesn't need the crutch or the support of anything else. It stands up by itself. And there isn't anything else which weakens it or strengthens it. Rather, it supports itself. And that whenever a person has the authentic sunnah, he has to act upon it no matter who went against it or who didn't implement it. We find these statements from Imam Shafi'i and from others who came generations before Ibn Rajab. That's the first problem. The next problem is, what if we have a hadith that's authentic and we find some of the Sahaba to take a different view? Some of them implemented and some didn't implement it. Which Sahaba do we follow? Who we don't follow? The hadith we believe is Sahih. Some of the Sahaba implemented it and others didn't. Whether they knew about it or not, regardless. The fact is that the issue that's proven by the hadith, that wasn't their madhab. They didn't pray with their hands like this or their hands like that, even though the hadith says it does or it doesn't. As an example. So what do we do? Whereas some of them implemented it and others left it off. Those who left it off, did they leave it off because the Prophet told them something that didn't reach us not to implement it? So that's problematic in itself. Very problematic. And then the concept of him saying, La yajuz, you cannot implement it if the Salaf agreed upon not implementing it. That's also a very interesting point. Not saying that's wrong, but it's you have to be very delicate, very careful in this issue now. Because when you start talking about the madhab of Imam Malik, rahimahullah, and his from the principles of his madhab is that he looked at what the people of Medina did, what they implemented, and what they implemented he took, and what they didn't implement he wouldn't take, even if the hadith was sahih, and he knew the hadith was sahih. Now that's a problem, because if you talk about the Salaf, there lies no doubt from the best starting points to find the Salaf is Medina. That's where the Prophet ﷺ lived and died. Not all the Sahaba stayed in Medina, but many of them did. Let alone Medina became a major center for knowledge and for hadith and fiqh, and the bid'ah that was in Iraq and in Persia and other places was not in Medina. So if you take this statement absolutely, then you would say that those views in which the hadith is clearly authentic, sahih, but Imam Malik didn't take the opinion because he says, I didn't see any of the people of Medina doing it. I never saw any of the ulama of Medina practicing this. Now you have a major problem, okay? And the whole concept of the rules and the laws that Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah laid down with regards to the sunnah being authentic. That's the first condition. Okay, the sunnah being authentic and being clear that it's mandatory to implement. And what Ibn Abdul Barr rahimahullah and others have narrated, the ijma' أن من استبانت له سنة رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لم يكن له ليدعها لقول أحد أو كما قالوا. They says that the sunnah is in agreement, that whenever, or the ulama are in agreement, the Muslims, the ummah, is that when the sunnah is clear in authenticity and in its dilala and what it proves, no one can leave it off for the statement of someone else. So that's very problematic. It's very problematic. Okay, and the concept that the Sahaba lived in different cities, and if Imam Malik didn't know of something in Medina, doesn't mean that there was no sunnah, there was no dalil for it. Okay, then we have another problematic issue with that speech, and that is, what about if the hadith isn't sahih, but we find that the Salaf as-Salih acted upon that hadith? Or if they didn't act upon a hadith, at least they implemented the issue that the hadith was talking about. Then what do we do? And we find the kalam of Imam at-Tirmidhi clearly shedding light upon this. At-Tirmidhi grades the hadith. He may say it's not sahih. It is sahih. He says, وَالْعَمَلُ عَلَيْهِ عِنْدَ أَهْلِ الْعِلْمِ مِنْ أَصْحَابِ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ وَمَنْ بَعْدَهُم. He says that the people of knowledge implemented this hadith from the Sahaba and those who came afterwards. Or there's some issues in which we don't find the athar of the Salaf regarding. So there has to be detail on this issue. There has to be detail. And to absolutely take that speech like that can be relatively problematic, as we've briefly explained. And Allah knows best. We don't want to get any further or go any further and get any deeper, because it's a very, very sticky, detailed issue. Khairan, inshallah. The author, rahimahullah ta'ala, he then says, قال عمر بن عبد العزيز خذوا من الرأي ما يوافق من كان قبلكم فإنه. Before we move on, we have to understand that when you look at the different ulama of the past, especially the four madhabs, there lies no doubt there is value in all of the four madhabs. Not saying that there are only four madhabs. As we explained before, there are madhabs that the ulama came before them and ulama who are after them. But just dealing with the four madhabs for a few reasons, and that is that when you look into those four madhabs, you see that all of the founders and all of the students did a great service to Islam. And they all have their ups and they all have their downs. And there's bigotry and fanaticism among all of the followers, all of them. You find people who say that they follow Imam Ahmed, they blindly clutch to Imam Ahmed's opinions. Those who say they follow Abu Hanifa, we don't even have to say anything about that, unfortunately. And it's not saying anything about Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah, but just the concept of the amount of bigotry found among people today who say that they're Hanafis. I would humbly say, it's probably from the worst bigotry that you'll find. Okay, there are bigots among other madhabs, yes, and they're zealous as well, extremists and people that are fanatical. But when you look at the people that, and I say true Hanafis, the people that say they're Hanafi, you look at their fanaticism and their bigotry and how they cling and clutch to it, it is a bit unique. And there are others as well, okay? Those who say they're Maliki, and the list goes on, What's important is that the principles of the madhab, all of them had valuable principles. And they all had a different way of looking at it and thinking about things that were beneficial. Okay, so those who study comparative fiqh and those who teach comparative fiqh, they take that which is good and that which is beneficial and they blend it into their own specific style. So this concept of when the Salaf agree upon not acting upon an authentic hadith, first and foremost, is that even possible? Is that even plausible? Or was the hadith abrogated? Is the hadith authentic? There's a lot of detail that's needed in that issue. But the general concept is that a person is to follow the Salaf as-Salih and their understanding, okay, and to take the dalil and understand the dalil in light of their understanding, okay, and other issues as well. Khayran, inshallah. He then says, Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, rahimahullah ta'ala, he said, خُذُوا مِنَ الرَّأِي مَا يُوَافِقُ مَنْ كَانَ قَبْلَكُمْ. He said, study ra'i. Study, have opinion in the concept of having a view and having your own way of discerning and determining something based off of what is in agreement with those who came before you. In other words, don't make a third opinion and the Salaf only had two views. Okay, don't bring a way of understanding that they didn't have. He says, because indeed they were more learned than you are. And as for that which goes against the action of the people of Medina from the hadith, he says, فهذا كان مالك يرى الأخذ بعمل أهل المدينة والأكثر أخذوا بالحديث. He says Imam Malik held the view that you should take what the people of Medina did, and most of the people took the hadith. But it goes back to what we just said. What if all we find is the statements of the Salaf in Medina, and we don't find any other athar? So does that mean that's all the Salaf then? So that's problematic, and it has to be, of course there's detail in every issue, just like their basic principles. But if you looked at it hypothetically, you're going to say either you're going to take the authentic hadith that's clear, it's authentic, there's no other hadith that's stronger going against it, or you're going to take the fiqh of the Salaf even if it goes against the hadith. But now we have Ahlul Medina take it, it's a problem. It goes back and forth. What do you want to do now? What is going to be your madhab? If there's consensus, the ulama of the Salaf agreed unanimously that this is not to be done, and then the hadith is either going to be weak and it may seem authentic, or it's going to be abrogated as mansukh, or one could say is that the intention behind the hadith or the objective of the hadith the ulama of the Salaf have agreed upon is not what's meant. But the concept of some of the people of Medina never ever did this act. Imam Malik says they never did it, I'm not going to do it. Okay, that's a problem, because the hadith is clearly sahih, and as a person either going to take the hadith all the time or take what the Salaf Salih radiallahu anhum did all of the time. Khayran inshallah. Moving on. There are also many beneficial points with regards to ra'i, the different hypothetical issues, theoretical issues. And some of the ulama, they said that if we do not make these hypothetical issues, if we do not ask these great ulama while they're alive what to do if this happens, then obviously when it does happen, then we're not going to know what to do. And the major ulama are not going to be alive. So we have to prepare ourselves for the problems before they come. And we can't just sit around and say, don't ask no questions unless it actually takes place. And then when it takes place, it's going to be too late. This is the way of thinking of some of those ulama. And other ulama, they said, no, do not ask these hypothetical questions. Wait until it happens. Make ijtihad, seek Allah's help when it happens, and then that's it. Khairan inshallah. The concept of the hadith versus the athar, the ra'i versus the sunnah, is a very long, detailed argument and discussion. And what is important is that there has to be detail. And from the best of the ulama who explained this in detail was Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah. In Fath al-Bari, he explains in the book Kitab al-I'tisam al-Kitab al-Sunnah about the different balance between the hadith and between the ra'i, and when to use the ra'i and when not to use the ra'i, when to make ijtihad and when not to make ijtihad. Very important and very beneficial for the student of knowledge who has the ability to read and understand that kalam. He then says, وَمِمَّا أَنْكَرَهُ أَئِمَّةُ السَّلَفِ الجدال والخصام والميراء في مسائل الحلال والحرام أيضا، ولم يكن ذلك طريقة أئمة الإسلام، وإنما أحدث ذلك بعدهم كما أحدث فقهاء العراقيين في مسائل الخلاف بين الشافعي والحنفية، وصنفوا كتب الخلاف ووسعوا البحث والجدال فيها، وكل ذلك محدث لا أصل له، وصار ذلك علمهم حتى شغلهم عن العلم النافع. He says from the things that the A'imma, the Imams of the Salaf rejected and denied, was the people making detailed arguments and debates and fighting with each other and bickering on each other on the issues of halal and haram. He says this is not the way of the Imams of Islam. Rather, this is something that was introduced by the ulama who came from the different sections and parts of Iraq, and the affairs of halal between the Shafi'i ulama and the Hanafi ulama. They wrote different books of khilaf, different views. They extended and stretched it out He says all of this is innovated, is muhdath. It has no basis. And unfortunately, this became their knowledge, so much so that it busied them from the true beneficial knowledge. Very important point here. And that is the bigotry and the fanaticism. I'm Shafi'i, I'm Hanafi. No, I'm better. No, we're better. Our madhab is better. Our imam has more knowledge. And let's sit down and just have arguments and debates on these issues, even though we're not prepared to change our views. We're not ready to change our blind following of this man. Okay, but let's sit and have a fierce, intense argument. He says this is all muhdath. And obviously, this issue is just like the previous issues. It's just like the previous issues. And that is debating like tulab al-ilm. And when we say tulab al-ilm, it doesn't mean that a person isn't a scholar or isn't an imam. But when we say a student of knowledge, meaning a student of the art. A student of the art. So debating as a talib, a student of the art, is to debate. Let's sit down, let's talk. Let's practice, let's spar, let's benefit each other, let's learn from each other. That's one thing. And let's have a fencing match. That's not the same as somebody coming in with no intention of listening or hearing to the next person's, hearing anything he has to say, or changing, or even thinking about it. But let's just debate for the purpose of debate. To show anyone who can talk longer and louder, anyone who can write more books, is automatically more knowledgeable than the next person. Okay, perhaps that's what the author is talking about. And it is not to be understood, as some people falsely understand, is that there is no concept of you can never debate in Islam, and you cannot debate the tulab al-ilm, tulab al-hadith come together and benefit from each other. There's a difference between munaqasha and between a person just fighting and bickering. They aren't the same. So we don't want no one to misunderstand that. He then says, وَقَدْ أَنْكَرَ ذَلِكَ السَّلَفِ. He says, وورد الحديث المرفوع السنن ما ضل قوم بعد هدى إلا أوتوا الجدل ثم قال ما ضربوه لك إلا جدلا بل هم قوم خصمون. وقال بعض السلف إذا أراد الله بعبد خيرا فتح له باب العمل وأغلق عنه باب الجدل، وإذا أراد الله بعبد شرا أغلق عنه باب العمل وفتح له باب الجدل. وقال مالك أدركت هذه البلدة وإنهم لا يكرهون هذا الإكثار الذي في الناس اليوم يريد المسائل. He then says, rahimahullah ta'ala, and the Salaf, they rejected this as well. They rejected this as well. And there's a hadith in the Sunan in which the Prophet ﷺ is quoted to have said, there's never a people who went astray except that they were given jadal, except that argumentation was thrown on them. They were afflicted with argumentation and this baseless arguing and bickering. And then the Prophet ﷺ, he recited the verse from Surah Al-Zukhruf, they make nothing for you except for argumentation. Rather, they are a people that are cast and thrown into this argumentation and fighting and bickering. Some of the Salaf, they said, whenever Allah wants good for a slave, He opens up the door for working deeds and shuts the door for him to argue and to debate. Whenever Allah wants bad for a slave, He does the opposite. Imam Malik, rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, indeed, I've lived here in Medina, in this city, this town. He says, and these, my teachers, the Salaf, they dislike what the people are doing today, of making so many different issues, the masail, this and that. He then says, وَكَانَ يَعِيبُ كَثْرَةَ الْكَلَامِ وَالْفُتْيَا وَيَقُولُ يَتَكَلَّمْ أَحَدُهُمْ كَأَنَّهُ جَمَلٌ مُغْتَلِمٌ يَقُولُ هُوَ كَذَا وَكَذَا يَهْدِرْ فِي كَلَامِهِ. He then says, in Imam Malik used to look down upon people that made so many different speeches and fatwas and rulings, speaking. He says some of them would say, or some of them would talk as if they were camels chewing on fodder, okay, chewing on grass, things like this, shrubs, just standing there chewing like a camel, like a cow, just sits and chews. It's this, it's so on and so on and so forth, not thinking about what to say and just talking. It's a very important concept here. Those who do not pay attention, who are not careful, who are not aware of what they say. But this speech, once again, is extremely problematic as well, from so many different ways. First and foremost is, Imam Malik, rahimahullah, has an abundance of fatwas that he gave. And there's an abundance of masail that he himself mentioned. Rather, in his book Muwatta, he gives his opinion and his view. And many of the Salaf didn't do that. And some of the Salaf even rejected that. Okay? And those who read Al-Mudawwanatul Kubra, you'll find all types of problematic statements with regards to the Athar, and with regards to the Kitab and Sunnah, and the statements of the people of Medina taking precedence. So that's a problem in itself. And there's no disrespect to Ibn Rajab or Imam Malik, or criticize any of them. We're trying to prove a point here. Okay? Is that Imam Malik himself, if you read some of his works, then compared to others, there's abundant speech and fatwa that he gave. Secondly is, those ulama, they looked at it from a different aspect, from a different angle. They said to themselves that just as there are different statements mentioned about not talking too much and saying about Allah what you don't know and making hypothetical issues and masail, he says then there are also hadiths about the obligation of spreading knowledge, the obligation of teaching knowledge, the obligation, that severe impermissibility of concealing knowledge, helping the people out. We have ayat, we have hadith that talk about asking the ulama, asking those who know if you don't know. Okay, let alone the different athar in which the Sahaba and the Salaf al-Salih would sit down and talk, and they would discuss issues, and they would refute each other, and they would pass fatwa. People would go and travel to Aisha to ask her questions. They would go and travel to Aisha and ask her questions. There's some times in which the Sahaba may say to the students, ask, what question? What do you have? Son, ya bunay, oh my son, don't be shy. Okay? So, there has to be a balance in this. And this is a very long issue with regards to those ulama who criticize Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah. And some of the people such as Sufyan Thawri, for example, Mathalan, as an example, according to what some people say, we don't want to get too deep into that, whether he refuted him or not, al-muhim, is that those who had a great deal of criticism of Abu Hanifa was because Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah gave a great amount of fatwa, especially more fatwa compared to others. And he spoke on hypothetical issues, theoretical issues, what if happens, and so on and so forth. So some of the ulama say that if Imam or those Imams were so pious not to give fatwa and so afraid, it doesn't mean that others had to be as well. If one had a great level of wara', it doesn't mean that the rest of the ulama had to have that same level of wara'. And it can be used on both sides. Somebody says, I'm so afraid to speak about Allah's religion, even though I have the knowledge and I'm qualified, but I'm afraid. And another person may say, I'm afraid of standing in front of Allah and hiding knowledge. I'm afraid of standing in front of Allah and being asked, why didn't you spread the knowledge to my slaves? So it can go both ways. The pendulum can move both ways. There are athar that the Salaf would refuse fatwa, and there are athar in which the Salaf would give fatwa. Starting from the Sahaba on down to the Tabi'een to Abu Hanifa, so on and so forth. Imam Malik himself gave fatwa, and his opinion was recorded. He has a madhab. He has followers and disciples, in which they asked him his view and he told them. So this speech here, without any doubt, is not absolute, and it is not 101% accepted. Okay, regardless whether he means this or whether he means that, this is not absolute, as we said before. It has to be a balance. Khairan, inshallah, let's move on. And what's important here is that the hujjah, the proof for all of this here is sunnah to Nabi. That's it. What did the Prophet ﷺ do? Did the Prophet allow people to ask him questions? Did the Prophet ﷺ teach the Sahaba before them asking him? Did the Prophet ask the Sahaba questions? That's the dalil. The dalil is the dalil. The Prophet ﷺ, he was asked, so on and so forth, so therefore it's permissible to ask. It's permissible to give. And the Prophet ﷺ made a severe threat for those who hide knowledge from the people. So there has to be a balance, not to go too far and just talking about everything, not being wary of what you say, throwing yourself headfirst into issues. But in 2016, you look around and you travel and you see the Muslims and then the non-Muslims, but just the Muslim world, you see the need for knowledge. And if you sit back and just sit in your library all day and read your book and drink your tea, That isn't real life. When you leave your home, you get on an airplane, you see the Muslims, how ignorant they are, how needy they are of ilm, how they're starving for basic Islamic knowledge, how many shayateen there are that speak about Islam that have no ilm, that mislead the people, that get the people to practice innovations and to disobey Allah and to go against the Sharia. There lies no doubt. The student of knowledge has to beware of these things. He has to beware of these things. And we don't want to speak about that any further. Ibn Rajab then says, وكان يكره الجواب في كثرة المسائل ويقول قال الله عز وجل ويسألونك عن الروح قل الروح من أمر ربي فلم يأتي في ذلك جواب وقيل له الرجل يكون عالما بالسنن يجادل عنها قال لا ولكن يخبر بالسنة فإن قبل منه وإلا سكت وقال المراء والجدال في العلم يذهب بنور العلم. He then says, in Imam Malik rahimahullah, he used to dislike giving the answer to every single question and all different types of questions. And he would say, Allah the Sublime, the Exalted says, and they ask you concerning the ruh, tell them, O Muhammad, the ruh is from the affair of my Lord. وَمَا أُوتِيتُم مِّنَ الْعِلْمِ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا. And you human beings have only been given a little bit of knowledge. He says, so the Prophet was asked about something and he wasn't given an answer by Allah. Or yani khair inshallah. He says here, and it was also said to Imam Malik, if a man is learned of the Sunnah, he knows about the Sunnah, should he debate and argue? Imam Malik said no. He should teach the people about the Sunnah, tell them about the Sunnah. If they accept it from him, that's good, and if not, then he remains silent. And he would also say, debating and arguing on ilm takes away the nur of ilm. And it's a very important concept, not to force people into your view, not to force people into your opinion. Give the people the ilm, teach the people the ilm. You can't force them to take it. And that speech, as well as we said, it has to be understood in the light of what we've previously mentioned. Imam Malik, there are books in which the ulama wrote, in which the opinion of Imam Malik is recorded. There are books in which the ulama wrote, in which Imam Malik gave fatwa. So there's a balance. There's what? There's a balance. As far as the ulama today, then you'll find, let's just make one simple brief example. And this is not the dalil as well, but we're trying to prove a point. Sheikh Abdul Aziz bin Baz rahimahullah, how many fatwas did he give? How many books did he write? How many lectures and radio programs, TV programs were transcribed? Let's just deal with one set of books. His Majmu' of Rasail and Fatawa is over 30 volumes long. 30 books. Let alone Nurun al-Darb, let alone these Fatawa, those Fatawa. There's 30 volumes in one set. So the concept of the need for the people to have ilm, their need to learn and to ask, is something that is a necessity. And when you listen to the radio programs, the old recordings, Imam Ibn Baz rahimahullah would sit down and the radio program was open. They would ask him any question that they wanted to. And how many different series, or how long is the series of Nurun al-Darb? So the concept of some students today, some scholars today, they'll say, oh, well, I can't answer this question because, Imam Malik said this. Or, no, I'm not going to give the class to these Muslims because this is the way the Salaf is not to talk like this. And I'm not going to talk about fiqh. I'm not going to explain to them. I'm not going to allow them to ask me questions because kada. La ilaha illallah. That's a musibah. And if you took that attitude and that approach, absolutely, then why are you even talking? Why are you giving the talk anyway? Because the Salaf were afraid of that as well. And they refused to do this as well. And they were pious and humble as well. So we can't have fake piety. And we can't take what we want and leave off what we want. Okay? Just as the Salaf wouldn't give these fatwa, the Salaf wouldn't do this khutbah. Nor would they take a position in a government. Nor would they visit the ruler. But you visit the ruler. So that's contradiction once again. And a lot of times people are weak and incapable to benefit the people and to answer their questions. And oftentimes they're jealous and envious against those who do have the ability to answer people's questions. And they try to bring these athar. So we can't play games. We cannot play games. It's haram for us to just play games and try to deceive the people and trick the people to think that we're so pious. in actuality, we're just picking and choosing what we want to. That isn't right and that isn't fair. And as I said, and what was stopping this halaqah is that when a person travels, only Allah knows the state of the Muslims when you travel, let alone the non-Muslims, and how strange the Sunnah is, how strange knowledge is, how strange practicing knowledge in Sunnah is, and the need for people to be more active, proactive, whatever you want to say, to go out, to speak, to call, to educate the people. Only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows. So ask Him subhanahu wa ta'ala, the sublime, the exalted, the Most High, to elevate the Sunnah and inspire the people who have some type of knowledge to promote and to teach that Sunnah, let alone clarify and clean up the tons of misconceptions that so many people have today about Islam, the Aqidah of Islam, the Ibadah of Islam, the Sharia of Islam, the Adab of Islam, politics, jihad, women's rights, this, that. The list goes on of clouds of misconceptions that so many people have. And you can only realize this when you leave your home and you interact with the people and you travel and you see the statement of the Prophet ﷺ, بَدَى الْإِسْلَامُ غَرِيبًا وَسَيَعُودُ غَرِيبًا, that Islam began as something strange and it will return as something strange. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله والله أعلم وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على عبده ورسوله نبينا محمد.